Just looking again at William Gemmell's the dark translation of the Diamond Sutra. Last time we were reading it, I got up to page 42. So let's just start from the end of page 41. Subhuti replied, saying, "Exceedingly great, honored of the worlds. And why? Because the Lord Buddha referred not to a physical body, but to mental and spiritual concepts of bodies, in which sense a body may be regarded as really great." Well, we're back up to page 42 now. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "If there were Ganges rivers as numerous as the sands of the Ganges, would the aggregate grains of sand be of considerable number?" Subhuti replied, saying, "A very considerable number, honored of the worlds. The rivers Ganges alone would be innumerable, and much more innumerable would be the grains of sand." The Lord Buddha thereupon addressed Subhuti, saying, "I have a truth to declare unto you. If a good disciple, whether man or woman, were to bestow in the exercise of charity an abundance of the 7 treasures sufficient to fill as many boundless universes as there would be grains of sand in these innumerable rivers, would the cumulative merit of such a disciple be considerable?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Very considerable, honored of the worlds." The Lord Buddha then declared unto Subhuti, "If a good disciple, whether man or woman, were with implicit faith to adhere to a stanza of this scripture and diligently explain it to others, the consequent merit would be relatively greater than the other." The thing is, how can you explain the Diamond Sutra to other people? I mean, as I said last time, it's about non-dualism, non-attachment, and non-egoity. How can you explain those things? How can you explain non-dualism? How can it be understood? How can non-attachment be understood in the sense of non-dualism and non-egoity? How can these things be explained? But the Diamond Sutra is explaining it anyway. The Lord Buddha, continuing, said unto Subhuti, "Wherever this scripture is proclaimed, even though it were but a stanza comprising 4 lines, we should realize that that place would be sanctified by the presence of the whole realm of gods, men, and terrestrial spirits, who ought unitedly to worship as if before a sacred shrine of Buddha. But what encomium shall express the merit of a disciple who rigorously observes and diligently studies the text of this scripture?" Encomium, I've made a note here before. Encomium, high commendation, a formal expression of praise. Plural, encomiums or encomia. But what encomium shall express the merit of a disciple who rigorously observes and diligently studies the text of this scripture? Subhuti, you should realize that such a disciple will be endowed with spiritual powers commensurate with initiation in the supreme, incomparable, and most wonderful law. Whatever place constitutes a repository for this sacred scripture, there also the Lord Buddha may be found, together with disciples worthy of reverence and honor. Well, I suppose that means, well, where I'm reading it must be a good place. Must be a good place. Upon that occasion, Subhuti inquired of the Lord Buddha, saying, "Honored of the worlds, by what name shall this scripture be known, that we may regard it with reverence?" The Lord Buddha replied, saying, "Subhuti, this scripture shall be known as the Diamond Sutra, the transcendent wisdom by means of which we reach the other shore." Yes, for people familiar with Buddhism, reaching the other shore, they will know about that already from having read the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra are both what are called, part in our paramita literature. The cat just shook the bed. Sorry about that. By this name you shall reverently regard it. And why? Subhuti, what the Lord Buddha declared as transcendent wisdom, by means of which we reach the other shore, is not essentially transcendent wisdom. In its essence, it transcends all wisdom. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Did the Lord Buddha formulate a precise system of law or doctrine?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha did not formulate a precise system of law or doctrine." The Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Within the myriad worlds which comprise this universe, are the atoms of dust numerous?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Very numerous, honored of the worlds." The Lord Buddha, continuing his discourse, said, "Subhuti, the Lord Buddha declares that all these atoms of dust are not essentially atoms of dust, they are merely termed atoms of dust." The Lord Buddha also declares that those myriad worlds are not really myriad worlds, they are merely designated myriad worlds. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Can the Lord Buddha be perceived by means of his 32 bodily distinctions?" Subhuti replied, saying, "No, honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha cannot be perceived by means of his 32 bodily distinctions." And why? Because what the Lord Buddha referred to as his 32 bodily distinctions are not in reality bodily distinctions, they are merely defined as bodily distinctions. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "If a good disciple, whether man or woman, day by day sacrificed lives innumerable as the sands of the Ganges, and if another disciple adhered with implicit faith to a stanza of this scripture and diligently explained it to others, the intrinsic merit of such a disciple would be relatively greater than the other." Upon that occasion, the Venerable Subhuti, hearing the text of this scripture proclaimed, and profoundly realizing its meaning, was moved to tears. Addressing the Lord Buddha, he said, "Thou art of transcendent wisdom, honored of the worlds." The Lord Buddha, in expounding the supreme canon of scripture, surpassed in perspicuity every exposition previously heard by me, since my eyes were privileged to perceive this most excellent wisdom. Honored of the worlds, in years to come, if disciples hearing the scripture proclaimed and having with it, if disciples hearing the scripture proclaimed and having within their minds a pure and holy faith engender true concepts of the ephemeral nature of phenomena, we ought to realize that the cumulative merit of such disciples will be intrinsic and wonderful. Honored of the worlds, the true concept of phenomena is that these are not essentially phenomena, and hence the Lord Buddha declared that they are merely termed phenomena. Just got to stop the screen from going black. I haven't disconnected the, what's it called when it goes black? Honored of the worlds, having heard this unprecedented scripture, faith, clear understanding, and firm resolve to observe its precepts follow as a natural sequence. I'll just read that one again. Honored of the worlds, having heard this unprecedented scripture, faith, clear understanding, and firm resolve to observe its precepts follow as a natural sequence. If in future ages disciples destined to hear this scripture likewise believe, understand, and observe its precepts, their merits will incite the highest wonder and praise. And why? Because the minds of those disciples will have outgrown such arbitrary ideas of phenomena. I just lost a page. There it is. Oops. Things have got a bit mixed up since I last read it. Because the minds of those disciples will have outgrown such arbitrary ideas of phenomena as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality. And why? Because the entity is in reality non-entity, and a being, a living being, or a personality are ideas equally nebulous and hypothetical. Wherefore, discarding every arbitrary idea of phenomena, the wise and wholly enlightened were severally designated Buddha. The Lord Buddha, assenting, said unto Subhuti, if in future ages disciples destined to hear the scripture neither become perturbed by its extreme modes of thought, well, non-dualism is a pretty extreme mode of thought because most people don't believe it's possible, do they? Neither, if in future ages disciples destined to hear the scripture neither become perturbed by its extreme modes of thought nor alarmed by its lofty sentiments, and lofty sentiments such as no ego and non-attachedness, nor apprehensive about realizing its high ideals, these disciples also, by their intrinsic merit, will incite superlative wonder and praise. Subhuti, what the Lord Buddha referred to as the first paramita, charity, is not in reality the first paramita. It is merely termed the first paramita. Yes, the paramitas are the perfections, and the perfections, and dana, D-A-N-A, is it dana or dana? Dana paramita is the first perfection. It's the perfection of charity. Subhuti, regarding the third paramita, endurance, that would be kshanti, wouldn't it? It is not in reality a paramita. It is merely termed a paramita. And why? Because in a previous life, when the prince of Kalinga, Kaliraja, severed the flesh from my limbs and body, at that time I was oblivious to such arbitrary ideas of phenomena as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality. So, if the Buddha was oblivious, he was non-attached, he was non-egoic, and he was non-dual, wasn't he? Non-dualist. And why? Because upon that occasion, when my limbs and body were rent asunder, had I not been oblivious to such arbitrary ideas as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality, there would have originated within my mind feelings of anger and resentment. So, if we're detached and non-egoic and non-dual, well, feelings of anger and resentment wouldn't arise in our minds if we're non-attached. We don't hate anybody, do we? We wouldn't get jealous or anything either. We wouldn't resent. Subhuti, 500 incarnations ago, that's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot of incarnations. Subhuti, 500 incarnations ago, I recollect that as a recluse practicing the ordinances of the Kshanti Paramita, even then I had no such arbitrary ideas as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality. Therefore, Subhuti, I'll just read that again, that bit. I recollect that as a recluse, practicing the ordinances of the Kshanti Paramita, even then I had no such arbitrary ideas as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality. Therefore, Subhuti, an enlightened disciple ought to discard as being unreal and elusive every conceivable form of phenomena. In aspiring to supreme spiritual wisdom, the mind ought to be insensible to every sensuous influence and independent of everything pertaining to sound, odor, taste, touch, or law. There ought to be cultivated a condition of complete independence of mind, because if the mind is depending upon any external aid, it is obviously deluded. There is in reality nothing external to depend upon. Therefore, there is in reality nothing external to depend upon. That's something to think about, isn't it? Is all Maya, is all illusion? Well, that's it. It's about the illusion of ego. That's what it's about. Therefore, the Lord Buddha declared that in the exercise of charity, the mind of an enlightened disciple ought not to depend upon any form of phenomena. Subhuti, an enlightened disciple, desirous or desirous? Subhuti, an enlightened disciple, desirous to confer benefits upon the whole realm of being, ought thus to be animated in the exercise of charity. The Lord Buddha, in declaring the unreality of phenomena, also affirmed that the whole realm of sentient life is ephemeral and illusory. Subhuti, the sayings of the Lord Buddha are true, credible, and mutable. His utterances are neither extravagant nor chimerical. Subhuti, the plane of thought to which the Lord Buddha attained cannot be explained in terms synonymous with reality or non-reality. Subhuti, in the exercise of charity, if the mind of an enlightened disciple is not independent of every law, is like unto a person having entered impenetrable darkness, and to whom every object is invisible. But an enlightened disciple, discharging the exercise of charity with a mind independent of every law, is like unto a person having the power of vision in the meridian glory of the sunlight, and to whom every object is visible. Subhuti. In future ages, if a good disciple, whether man or woman, rigorously studies and observes the text of this scripture, the Lord Buddha, by means of his Buddhic wisdom, entirely knows and perceives that for such a disciple there is reserved a cumulative merit immeasurable and illimitable. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, if a good disciple, whether man or woman, in the morning, at noonday, and at eventide, sacrificed lives innumerable as the sands of the Ganges, and thus without intermission throughout infinite ages, and if another disciple, hearing the scripture proclaimed steadfastly, believed it, hearing the scriptures proclaimed steadfastly believed it, his felicity would be appreciably greater than the other. But how much greater must be the felicity of a disciple who transcribes the sacred text, observes its precepts, studies its laws, and repeats the scripture, that others may be edified thereby. Subhuti, the relative importance of this scripture may thus be summarily stated. Its truth is infinite, its worth is incomparable, and its merit interminable. The Lord Buddha delivered this scripture specifically for those who are entered upon the path which leads to nirvana, and for those who are attaining to the ultimate plane of Buddhic thought. If a disciple rigorously observes, studies, and widely disseminates the knowledge of this scripture, the Lord Buddha entirely knows and perceives that for such an one there will be a cumulative merit, immeasurable, incomparable, illimitable, and inconceivable. This text is written in a beautiful rhythmic way. You can get the flow of it. It's the way it's punctuated and everything. It's rhythmic. There will be a cumulative merit, immeasurable, incomparable, illimitable, and inconceivable. All such disciples will be endowed with transcendent Buddhic wisdom and enlightenment. And why? Because, Subhuti, if a disciple takes pleasure in a narrow or exclusive form of the law, he cannot receive with gratification the instruction of this scripture, or delight in its study, or fervently explain it to others. Subhuti, in whatever place there is a repository for this scripture, that would include you too, wouldn't it? The whole realm of spiritual beings ought to adore it, and reverencing it as a sacred shrine, ceremoniously surround it, scattering profusely sweet-scented flowers and pure odors of fragrant incense. The Lord Buddha, continuing, addressed Subhuti, saying, if a good disciple, whether man or woman, devoted to the observance and study of this scripture, is thereby despised or lightly esteemed, it is because that, in a previous life, there had been committed some grievous transgression, followed now by inexorable retribution. But, although in this life despised or lightly esteemed, the compensating merit thus acquired will cause the transgression of a former life to be fully expiated, and the disciple adequately recompensed by the attainment of supreme spiritual wisdom. What is supreme spiritual wisdom? It's reaching the state of egolessness, non-attachedness, and non-dualism. I suppose you could call it a sort of triangle. All three of them, egolessness and detachedness or non-attachedness and non-dualism. Non-dualism, egolessness and detachedness, non-attachedness, they're all part of the one thing, the supreme spiritual wisdom. Furthermore, Subhuti, numberless ages ago, I recollect that before the advent of Dipankara Bhuta, there were myriad Bhutas before whom I served and received religious instruction, my conduct being entirely blameless and without reproach. But in the ages to come, if a disciple be enabled to rigorously observe and to study the text of the scripture, the merit thus acquired will so far exceed the measure of my merit in the service of those myriad Buddhas that it cannot be stated in terms of proportion nor comprehended by means of any analogy. So this wisdom, yes, it's something worth striving for, isn't it? And it's also unexplainable. It can't be explained. So there's no point in reading the sutra in the first place, is there? Again, Subhuti, in future ages, if a good disciple, whether man or woman, be enabled to rigorously observe and to study consecutively the texts of this scripture, were I to elaborate either the nature or extent of this merit, those who heard it might become delirious or entirely doubt its credibility. Subhuti, it is necessary to realize that as the meaning of this scripture is beyond ordinary comprehension, the scope of its fruitful rewards is equally incomprehensible. So listen to that. The scripture is beyond ordinary comprehension. And the rewards, yes, the benefits of it are equally incomprehensible. Upon that occasion, the Venerable Subhuti addressed the Lord Buddha, saying, "Honored of the worlds, if a good disciple, whether man or woman, having desired to attain to supreme spiritual wisdom, what immutable law shall support the mind of that disciple and bring into subjection every inordinate desire?" That is, how do we purify our minds? The Lord Buddha replied, saying, "A good disciple, whether man or woman, ought thus to habituate his mind. I must become oblivious to every idea of sentient life." That would be to egoity. And having become oblivious to every idea of sentient life, there is no one, that is, there is no ego or self, to whom the idea of sentient life has become oblivious. And why? Because, Subhuti, if an enlightened disciple retains within his mind such arbitrary ideas of sentient life as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality, they're all signs of egoity, those things, entity, being, a living being, or a personality, he has not attained to supreme spiritual wisdom. And why? Because, Subhuti, there is no law by means of which a disciple may be defined as one having obtained supreme spiritual wisdom. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? When the Lord Buddha was a disciple of Dipankara Bhuta, was there bequeathed to him any law whereby he attained to supreme spiritual wisdom?" Subhuti replied, saying, "No, honored of the worlds, inasmuch as I am able to comprehend the meaning of the Lord Buddha's discourse, when the Lord Buddha was a disciple of Dipankara Bhuta, there was no law bequeathed to him whereby he attained to supreme spiritual wisdom." The Lord Buddha endorsed these words, saying, "Truly, there is no law by means of which the Lord Buddha obtained supreme spiritual wisdom." Subhuti, if there existed a law by means of which the Lord Buddha obtained supreme spiritual wisdom, Dipankara Bhuta would not have foretold at my initiation, "In future ages thou shalt become Shakyamuni Buddha." But, in reality, there is no law by means of which supreme spiritual wisdom can be obtained. Therefore, At my initiation, Dipankara Bhuta foretold concerning me, in future ages thou shalt become Shakyamuni Bhuta. And why? Because in the word Bhuta, every law is summarily and intelligibly comprehended. If a disciple affirmed that the Lord Buddha attained to supreme spiritual wisdom, that's also known as Inittara Samyak Sambodhi, it is necessary to state that there is no law whereby this condition of mind can be realized. The supreme spiritual wisdom to which the Lord Buddha attained cannot in its essence be defined as real or unreal. Thus, the Lord Buddha declared that the ordinarily accepted term, the Buddhic law, is synonymous with every moral and spiritual law. Subhuti, what are ordinarily declared to be systems of law are not in reality systems of law. They are merely termed systems of law. The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "Can you imagine a man having a great physical body?" Subhuti replied, saying, "The Lord Buddha, discoursing upon the proportions of a physical body, did not maintain for these any real greatness, therefore it is merely termed a great body." The Lord Buddha thereupon addressed Subhuti, saying, "Thus it is with an enlightened disciple. If he were to expatiate after this manner, I must become oblivious to every idea of sentient life. He could not be described as fully enlightened." And what does expatiate mean? A verb intransitive? Is that what VI stands for? To range at large, to enlarge in discourse, argument, writing on. If we were to expatiate after this manner, I must become oblivious to every idea of sentient life. He could not be described as fully enlightened. And why? Because there is no law whereby a disciple can be approved as fully enlightened. Therefore, the Lord Buddha declared that within the realm of spiritual law there is neither an entity, a being, a living being, nor a personality, and nor would there be a duality, and nor would there be any attachment. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "If an enlightened disciple were to speak in this wise, I shall create numerous Buddhist kingdoms. He could not be designated fully enlightened. And why? Because the Lord Buddha, discoursing upon creating numerous Buddhist kingdoms, did not affirm the idea of creating numerous material Buddhist kingdoms. Hence the creation of numerous Buddhist kingdoms is merely a figure of speech." Subhuti, the Lord Buddha declared that a disciple may be regarded as truly enlightened whose mind is thoroughly imbued with the law of non-individuality, that is, the law of non-ego, really. The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Does the Lord Buddha possess the physical eye?" Subhuti assented, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha truly possesses the physical eye." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Does the Lord Buddha possess the divine or spiritual eye?" Subhuti assented, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha truly possesses the divine or spiritual eye." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Does the Lord Buddha possess the eye of wisdom?" Subhuti assented, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha truly possesses the eye of wisdom." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Does the Lord Buddha possess the eye of truth?" Subhuti assented, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha truly possesses the eye of truth." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Does the Lord Buddha possess the Buddhic eye?" Subhuti assented, saying, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha truly possesses the Buddhic eye." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Concerning the sands of the Ganges, did the Lord Buddha declare that these were grains of sand?" Subhuti assenting said, "Honored of the worlds, the Lord Buddha declared that these were grains of sand." The Lord Buddha inquired of Subhuti, saying, "What think you? If there were as many rivers Ganges as there are grains of sand in the Ganges, and if there were as many Buddhist worlds as the grains of sand in those innumerable rivers, would these Buddhist worlds be numerous?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Honored of the worlds, these Buddhist worlds would be very numerous." The Lord Buddha, continuing, addressed Subhuti, saying, "Within these innumerable worlds, every form of sentient life with their various mental dispositions are entirely known to the Lord Buddha." And why? Because what the Lord Buddha referred to as their various mental dispositions are not in reality their various mental dispositions, is merely termed their various mental dispositions. And why? Because, Subhuti, dispositions of mind or modes of thought, whether relating to the past, the present, or the future, are alike unreal and illusory. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? If a disciple, having obtained all the treasures of this universe, were to bestow these in the exercise of charity, would such a disciple consequently enjoy a considerable merit?" Subhuti, assenting, said, "Honored of the worlds, such a disciple would consequently enjoy a very considerable merit." The Lord Buddha thereupon addressed Subhuti, saying, "If there were any real or permanent quality in merit, the Lord Buddha would not have spoken of such merit as considerable. It is because there is neither a tangible nor material quality in merit that the Lord Buddha referred to the merit of that disciple as considerable." The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Can the Lord Buddha be perceived by means of his perfect material body?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Honored of the worlds, it is improbable that the Lord Buddha can be perceived by means of his perfect material body." And why? Because what the Lord Buddha referred to as a perfect material body is not in reality a perfect material body. It is merely termed a perfect material body. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "What think you? Can the Lord Buddha be perceived by means of any physical phenomena?" Subhuti replied, saying, "Honored of the worlds, it is improbable that the Lord Buddha can be perceived by means of any physical phenomena." And why? Because what the Lord Buddha referred to as physical phenomena are not in reality physical phenomena. These are merely termed physical phenomena. That makes sense. That makes sense, doesn't it? The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "Do not affirm that the Lord Buddha thinks thus within himself. I ought to promulgate a system of law or doctrine. Have no such irrelevant thought." And why? Because if a disciple affirmed that the Lord Buddha promulgated a system of law or doctrine, he would defame the Lord Buddha, being manifestly unable to understand the purport of my instruction. Subhuti, regarding the promulgation of a system of law or doctrine, there is in reality no system of law or doctrine to promulgate. It is merely termed a system of law or doctrine. Upon that occasion, the virtuous and venerable Subhuti inquired of the Lord Buddha, saying, excuse me, "Honored of the worlds, in ages to come, will sentient beings destined to hear this law engender within their minds the essential elements of faith?" The Lord Buddha replied, saying, "Subhuti, it cannot be asserted that these are sentient beings, or that these are not sentient beings." And why? Because, Subhuti, regarding sentient beings, the Lord Buddha declared that in reality these are not sentient beings, they are merely termed sentient beings. Subhuti, this is all about ego, the relativity of an ego and non-ego. Subhuti inquired of the Lord Buddha, saying, "Honored of the worlds, did the Lord Buddha, in attaining to supreme spiritual wisdom, obtain nothing of a real or tangible nature?" The Lord Buddha replied, saying, "In attaining to supreme spiritual wisdom, not a vestige of law or doctrine was obtained, and therefore it is termed supreme spiritual wisdom." Do you hear that? Do you hear that? In attaining to supreme spiritual wisdom, not a vestige of law or doctrine was obtained, and therefore it is termed supreme spiritual wisdom. Well, that's helpful. That's helpful, isn't it? That's very helpful. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, "This law is coherent and indivisible. It is neither above nor below. Therefore, it is termed supreme spiritual wisdom. It excludes such arbitrary ideas as an entity, a being, a living being, or a personality. That is, it excludes egoity, doesn't it, basically? But includes every law pertaining to the cultivation of goodness. And goodness could only be insightful use of energy, couldn't it? I suppose. Subhuti, what were referred to as laws pertaining to goodness, these, the Lord Buddha declared, are not in reality laws pertaining to goodness. They are merely termed laws pertaining to goodness. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, if within this universe of universes the seven treasures were heaped together, forming as many great elevations as there are Sumus, Prince of Mountains, and these treasures bestowed entirely in the exercise of charity, and if a disciple were to select a stanza of this scripture, rigorously observe it and diligently explain it to others, the merit thus obtained would so far exceed the former excellence that it cannot be stated in terms of proportion nor comprehended by any analogy. This is all about non-dualism, non-egoity, and non-attachment. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, what think you? You disciples do not affirm that the Lord Buddha reflects thus within himself, I bring salvation to every living being. Subhuti, entertain no such delusive thought. And why? Because in reality there are no living beings to whom the Lord Buddha can bring salvation. If there were living beings to whom the Lord Buddha could bring salvation, the Lord Buddha would necessarily assume the reality of such arbitrary concepts as an entity, a being, a living being, and a personality. This means that the Buddha himself is non-egoic and non-dualist and non-attached. That's what it means, doesn't it? Subhuti, what the Lord Buddha adverted to as an entity is not in reality an entity. That could be read, is not what the Lord Buddha adverted to as an ego is not in reality an ego. It is only understood to be an entity or an ego, and believed in as such by the common uneducated people. So I'll read that bit again. Subhuti, what the Lord Buddha adverted to as an entity is not in reality an entity. It is only understood to be an entity, and believed in as such by the common uneducated people. Subhuti, yes, adverted to as in advertising, yes. Subhuti, what are ordinarily referred to as the common uneducated people, these the Lord Buddha declared to be not merely common uneducated people. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti, saying, can the Lord Buddha be perceived by means of his 32 bodily distinctions? By means of his 32 bodily distinctions? Subhuti replied, saying, even so, the Lord Buddha can be perceived by means of his 32 bodily distinctions. The Lord Buddha, continuing, said unto Subhuti, if by means of his 32 body distinctions it were possible to perceive the Lord Buddha, then the Lord Buddha would merely resemble one of the great wheel-turning kings. Subhuti thereupon addressed the Lord Buddha, saying, honoured of the worlds, according as I am able to interpret the Lord Buddha's instruction, it is improbable that the Lord Buddha may be perceived by means of his 32 bodily distinctions. Thereafter, the honoured of the worlds delivered this sublime gatha. I am not to be perceived by means of any visible form, nor sought after by means of any audible sound. Whosoever walks in the way of iniquity cannot perceive the blessedness of the Lord Buddha. The Lord Buddha said unto Subhuti, if you think thus within yourself, the Lord Buddha did not, by means of his perfect bodily distinctions, obtain supreme spiritual wisdom. Subhuti, have no such deceptive thought. Or if you think thus within yourself, in obtaining supreme spiritual wisdom, the Lord Buddha declared the abrogation of every law. Subhuti, have no such delusive thought. And why? Because those disciples who obtain supreme spiritual wisdom neither affirm the abrogation of any law, nor the destruction of any distinctive quality of phenomena. Abrogation means act of repealing or setting aside. The Lord Buddha addressed Subhuti saying, if an enlightened disciple in the exercise of, where I've lost the piece, I know. In the exercise of, I know where it is, it's over here. In the exercise of charity, bestowed as considerable amount of the seven treasures as might fill worlds innumerous as the sands of the Ganges, and if a disciple, realizing that within the meaning and purport of the law there is no abstract individual existence, perfects himself in the virtue of endurance, this latter disciple will have a cumulative merit relatively greater than the other. And why? Because enlightened disciples are entirely unaffected by considerations of reward or merit. That is, they're not dualist, are they? They're not dualist. They're not attached to one or the other. They're not attached to this or that. Black or white, up or down, good or evil, are they? Subhuti thereupon inquired of the Lord Buddha, saying, Honoured of the worlds, in what respect are enlightened disciples unaffected by considerations of reward or merit? The Lord Buddha replied, saying, Enlightened disciples do not aspire in a spirit of covetousness to rewards commensurate with their merit. Therefore, I declare that they are entirely unaffected by considerations of reward or merit. I think I'd better stop now. This is page 99, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So, I think I should stop now. See ya. Reading from William Gemmell's translation of the Diamond Sutra. William Gemmell.